Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Lavender Learning channel. My name is Jane and I'm an Australian educator. And today I'd like to talk about 5 foundational reading concepts for your toddler. The reason that I thought this was a video worth making is because over many years I've spoken with parents at playgroups and activities that my own children have been part of or activities that I have led for young children. And I've been asked many times by parents what they can be doing to help their children establish some early reading skills and concepts that will lay the foundation for future reading. So this is a quick presentation of 5 easy things you can be helping your child to understand while you're reading with them in your regular story time at home. I've chosen a book today to include for my examples, and this book is one that my own children found very special when they were young. It's called 10 Little Fingers and 10 Little Toes, and it's written by Australian author Mem Fox. If you haven't read this book, I do highly recommend it for young children. It has a beautiful, repetitive message, a simple message, and a lovely ending that you can share with your child. It's well worth adding to your family library, or at least popping down to your local library and borrowing a copy for a little while. The version that I've included in the images that you'll see here today is the board book version, because my children enjoyed this book when they were really very young, and this book is one that you can put in a toddler's room for them to enjoy on their own as well. I have a lot of books that I have bought in board book version and then have gone on to buy the hardcover or the soft paperback version down the track as my children have become older. And this one here was just a favourite. So the first concept I'd like to talk about today is how we might use the book's cover in helping our children to understand how we use books and what the cover's purpose might be. Every book, unless it's been damaged through lots of love, it has a cover. And the cover's purpose is to give us the title of the book and often to include the name of the author and the illustrator and to include an image that might give us a hint about what's coming. Now, when we're talking to children, we can be pointing out these things. We can be explaining to them what the words on the cover mean, that it's the title of the book, and that's what we call the book when we go and pick it up off the shelf, or if they are requesting a book, that they can use the title of the book to ask for it, and not just the book with the little baby, for example. That's nothing wrong with that, but using the title of the book can come from looking at the cover. Understanding the purpose of the author and the illustrator, their jobs and what they have done in creating the book is also important. I like to make connections with my children between the author and the illustrator of the book we're reading and any other books or any other exposure they've had to that author or illustrator. And then looking at the images as well, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, you'll know the joy that a child has when they recognise a familiar cover from a book that they love. And so the cover of the book can become that source of great recognition, which is really lovely. So that's important. But when you get a new book, there can be a level of anticipation and excitement and prediction that you can have by looking at the cover of a book for the first time. And so that is one way that the cover of a book can really help a child develop some early comprehension skills, because making predictions and checking how well the prediction matches with what comes later in the book is an important skill for making meaning as we're reading and comprehending what it is we're reading and whether it matches what we are expecting or whether we're surprised and why we might be surprised, that sort of thing. So when we get a new book, we can look at the cover and have a conversation with the child about what it is they think the book is going to be about. We could talk about whether the book is likely to be a fun story or whether it maybe contains some facts about something that we're learning about. A dinosaur book might contain information, true scientific information about dinosaurs. We might be able to guess that a storybook, a narrative, is a story because the characters on the front might be imaginative characters. For example, might be creatures which don't exist in in real life, and lots of young children's books do contain those sorts of characters. We can be having those conversations with our children as we're looking at the book, and not in a deeply theoretical way, but just by asking general little questions, such as, what do you think this book is going to be about? What do you think might happen? I wonder what this character here is going to do in the story. And then if you see characters from the front cover or events that have been predicted pop up through the book, you can always go back and make reference and remind the child that that is what they thought would happen, or that that is the character that we saw on the front cover. And I know with my own children, often when we've been reading picture books, they'll remember and say, hey, that's the picture that's on the front cover, or that's the character from the front cover. So just getting that understanding about the cover and how the cover is sort of like an advertisement for what's to come in the book. So that's my first concept for today. The second concept is around turning the pages. And I guess here the other thing that we could talk about is how we hold a book and making sure that we understand that the pictures and the text are in the right direction. And then that we turn the pages as we're progressing through the story in order when we've read the words that are on the page. And so the way that we turn pages is, I guess, the way the author intended the story to unfold. And so when we're reading with children, we want to be making sure that they understand that we need to turn the page when we've finished reading what's written on that page and not before. And sometimes we may need to tell an enthusiastic child that they just need to wait a minute because we haven't quite finished to see what's coming next. But also turning the pages can allow for that anticipation and prediction of what's coming next. So you can say, oh, what do you think might be going to happen next? Or the words on the page might lead to that anticipation. And then, that sort of thing. Some books have a little hint of the image that's coming over the page, and that can be a really good way of encouraging that prediction as well. So when we're turning pages, we're thinking about what might be happening next. We're letting the child know that the story progresses at the pace that the author and the illustrator intended, and that we don't just flick through and make up the words as we're going, which is something I'll talk about soon. And also the importance of turning the pages slowly so we don't miss any parts of the story. And you've probably had the experience yourself. I know I have, more so with paperbacks, where I might accidentally flick over a couple of pages at once, and then the story doesn't really make sense. And we think, hang on, I think I've missed something here. So just reminding the child how important it is to make sure we do see every page as the author intended. Now, the third concept is one of the things we call a concept of print, how print in a book works or print in a text works. For this one, the importance of the print is how the print is placed on the page, or the direction of the print. The idea that we move from a left to right, and we do this thing called a return sweep. When we get to the end of one line, we come back, we move down, and we start reading across the next line. Now, that might seem fairly obvious if you're a confident and experienced reader, but for young children who haven't seen print before, this is a new concept. And so we can demonstrate that by running our fingers smoothly under the lines as we read. You don't have to do that all the time, but just sometimes to demonstrate that. We don't want to be encouraging children to put their finger under every single word and slowly say the words like you might think of with an early reader. Two reasons for that. One is because sometimes that habit can develop where a child then becomes very stilted in their reading. They may think that reading should sound like this because we've got this idea that they have to methodically place their finger under every word. But also it can slow them down. I mean, if their finger doesn't move as fast as their eye can read, then eventually that will slow them down. But some children do need that visual guide. And if that is the case, as they become readers, you can certainly keep your finger moving smoothly under the lines of print. But at this age, with younger children, early childhood and toddlers, just starting to show them that you're reading the words, that this is how it goes, can be very helpful. Sometimes the author and the illustrator also work together to place the print in other parts of the page. And they might be in a different font. They might be as part of the image or the illustration on the page. And so explaining why that might be. And also the placement of things like quotes or blurbs that might go with diagrams. It's important to read all of those as well and explain why they might be placed where they are on the page. Then the next concept is the idea that the print is constant, that it doesn't change each time we read the book. I know myself how adorable it was to see my children pick up a book that we had read together and then read it themselves, giving an approximation of the story. Now that is a really important skill, being able to retell something that you've read, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it is important that the child understands that when you read a book, you're reading the author's words, and the words that we say don't change any time that we read the book. We read the same words every time we read that book. And so one way that we can develop that understanding of constancy of print is by doing the things that we talked about earlier, mentioning that we only turn the page when we've said the words that were written for that page, keeping our finger sometimes under the words just to demonstrate that the words that are coming from our mouths are aligned with the words that are written on the page. And then also reading the same books repeatedly so that the child becomes familiar with the way that the parent reads the same, or the caregiver reads the same words over and over, and they don't change between readings. So that's one thing. And on this page that I've got here on the image, there's the idea that we wouldn't turn that page, even though we know the pattern that comes in the book, and you'll probably guess it from the title, 10 Little Fingers and 10 Little Toes. But we don't say 10 little toes on this page because it says has 10 little fingers. So we're going to wait and turn the page because the words on this page don't say and 10 little toes. That kind of thing. Just reminding the child that the words on the page are constant. And then finally, that idea of that print to word connection. So the reason we don't say that is because the words on this page are the ones which talk about the 10 little toes. So books like that where there's a pattern and maybe every now and then it changes, that allows us to say, hang on a minute, the words that you just said in that pattern weren't on that page. They're on this next page here. And I can see because here's the word toes. And this is the picture that goes with the toes because the mum is touching the little baby's toes. So we need to make sure that this is the page where we read those words because this is where the author put those words. So just keeping the idea of the constancy of the print and the print to word connection are quite closely aligned. We say the words that are on the page and we don't change it or make it up because we have to read what's written. And we read what's written for that page because the words that I'm saying match up here with the little letters and words on the page there. Now we can talk another time about introducing those kind of ideas, the words of page and the word and letter and how we start to introduce those things to children. But at this stage, we're just letting them know that basically when they see those little black things on the page, those are the things that we as parents or caregivers are reading. And that we read the author's message. We don't make it up ourselves. We read it the way that it was intended to be read. And we see on the page exactly what the words are that we are supposed to say for that particular image. And we don't change it or we don't rush ahead because we have to stick with what's actually written in front of us. Now, children will get some of these skills they'll absorb some of these skills naturally if you read with them repeatedly, particularly reading the same books repeatedly as their favourites. And then they will also develop some of those skills of predicting and guessing as they turn the page by reading lots of new books as well, and being able to make predictions and check them for the first time with a new text. So a really good mix of both familiar and new will help you develop these 5 concepts. I hope that's been helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like me to cover any other concepts or you have some questions, please let me know. You can email me at jane@lavenderlearning.com.au or comment on this video. Thanks very much for your time.